Hello, my name is Tanya Vela, and I am the Accessible Ohio Specialist for Southeast Ohio. Today's presentation is all about service animals.
Hello, my name is Missy O'Brien, and I am the Career Development Specialist for Southwest Ohio. We plan for accessibility from the start. For example, we use the accessibility checker that is built into Microsoft 365 to review the resource guide in PowerPoint. We address color contrast, font style, and size, and add alternative text known as alt text to visual images. Also, in our delivery, we mention each other by name as the conversation goes back and forth to indicate who is speaking. This can be helpful when attendees are receiving this information through services like American Sign Language interpretation and live captioning. After the webinar, we edit the transcript and fix any captioning errors before uploading the webinar to our on-demand library. We also include a reasonable accommodation statement in our invitation to the webinar, so attendees need an accommodation, they know who to contact to ask. Taking these steps up front can make this presentation more accessible and inclusive for everyone. Tanya, will you share an overview of today's webinar?
Yes, thank you, Missy. Today's webinar is focused on service animals. We'll define what a service animal is, discuss how to interact with individuals and their service animals while in the workplace or in a community setting. And lastly, we'll describe ways to accommodate service animals in the workplace and in the community. Missy, let's begin.
Sure. To start, let's define service animals and discuss their purpose and who uses them. We'll then cover the difference between service animals and other types of animals and address some commonly asked questions. The Americans with Disability Act, or ADA, defines service animals as a dog that is individually trained to do work or perform tasks for people with disabilities. Service animals are not pets. They are working animals, and we will address proper etiquette for interacting with them. The ADA does have specific provisions which cover miniature horses that have been trained as service animals. Today's training focuses on dogs that are service animals in both the community and the workplace. Tanya, would you share the purpose of service animals and how they may assist people with disabilities?
Certainly. Service animals perform a range of tasks, which mean they are useful across a variety of disability types. People with disabilities may use service animals to fully participate in their daily life activities. This could mean a service animal could be of help when a person with a disability is performing work, accessing environments, and enjoying events in the community. Here are some examples. A person who is blind may use a service animal as a guide to navigate the workplace and the community. A person who uses a wheelchair may use a service animal to open a door or to turn the lights on and off. A person who is deaf may use a service animal to provide an alert about a sound in the workplace, or the animal could provide an alert to a person with diabetes. Service animals can also be used to calm a person with an anxiety disorder and remind a person to take medication. Today's webinar focuses on service animals. However, there are other common uses for animals, such as an emotional support or comfort animals and therapy animals. Missy, let's discuss the difference between them.
Sounds great, Tanya. I'll share more about the role of each animal that they may have. As we mentioned, service animals perform tasks or work for individuals with disability. Not all service animals are professionally trained, but many are. Either way, the animal participates in extensive training to follow commands and perform tasks needed. The dog and the handler become a team, with the service animal performing jobs to ensure their handler can participate in daily activities. Emotional support animals provide emotional support to one specific person. This can be a person with or without a disability. These animals help individuals manage the effects of conditions such as loneliness, anxiety, and certain phobias, and they provide companionship. They are not trained to perform tasks like service animals are. Their intent is to provide support by being present. Therapy animals provide healing contact to an individual or group of people. This often occurs in a clinical or school setting. The goal is to improve a person's physical, social, emotional, and or cognitive functioning. Comfort animals provide calm during a crisis to an individual or group of people. This often occurs in an emergency or an active disaster. The goal is to provide a calm distraction. Service animals are covered under Titles 2 and 3 of the ADA. Emotional support animals, therapy animals, and comfort animals are often dogs, but can be other types of animals. These types of animals are not covered under Titles 2 and 3 of the ADA. Tanya, let's share more about these titles.
Sure. The ADA is a civil rights law that makes it unlawful to discriminate against individuals with disabilities in all facets of public life. Title I prohibits discrimination based on disability in all aspects of employment and requires covered employers to provide reasonable accommodations to individuals with disabilities when needed. For example, an accommodation employers may consider is to modify a no animal policy to permit the use of service animals or other types of animals in the workplace. For the purpose of today's webinar, we're focusing on dogs as service animals. Title II prohibits discrimination based on disability in programs, services, and activities offered to the public by state and local governments. And Title III of the ADA prohibits discrimination based on disability in commercial facilities and places of public accommodation. The ADA states that local and state governments, businesses, and nonprofit organizations that serve the public generally must allow service animals to accompany people with disabilities in all areas of the facility where the public is allowed to go. Missy, what are some common misconceptions associated with the use of service animals?
Tanya, there are a few we can cover. So why don't we pause and cover some facts directly from the ADA's Frequently Asked Questions webpage. We have 4 commonly asked questions, and we would like our audience to participate. I'll ask each question, and a poll will appear on your screen. We ask our audience to answer each question to assist in helping us with busting these myths. Our first question should appear on your screen. Do service animals have to wear a vest, patch, or harness that identifies them as a service animal? Please select yes or no.
Well, Missy, it looks like most of our participants have said yes, that they have to wear a vest. What's the answer?
Well, the answer is actually no. The ADA does not require service animals to wear a vest, ID tag, or specific harness for identification. Regarding a harness, the ADA guidance indicates the service animal must be under the control of its handler. This means the animal needs to be harnessed, leashed, or tethered when in community spaces, unless these interfere with the animal's ability to perform their tasks safely and effectively. When that is the case, control may be through voice, signals, or other effective means. If you have questions about whether this conflicts with leash laws in your area, we advise you to consult with your legal professionals. Our next question: who is responsible for the care and supervision of the service animal? Your options are the animal's handler, the venue supervisor, or no one because the animal is trained.
I'm waiting for people to come in with their responses. Looks like we've got some mixed responses. What is the answer?
The answer is the handler is responsible for caring for and controlling the animal. This includes toileting, feeding, grooming, and veterinarian care. Another frequently asked question is, can a person bring more than one service animal into a public space? Please answer yes or no.
Okay, people are still weighing in, Missy. It looks like about 3/4 of our audience believes that yes, you can bring in more than one animal. Missy, what is the answer?
Generally, yes. A person with a disability may use more than one service animal to perform different tasks. The ADA provides examples. One of these describes a person who has a visual disability and a seizure disorder. This individual has a service animal for wayfinding and a service animal to alert them when they are about to have a seizure. And our last question. Does the ADA require service animals to be professionally trained? Please select yes or no.
About half the audience have responded. Okay. So, Missy, it looks like we're at about a 50-50 split on this question. What's the correct answer?
Well, if you answered no, you answered correctly. People with a disability have the right to train the dog themselves and are not required to use professional service dog training programs. Thank you to our audience for participating. Tanya, now that we have dispelled some myths, let's discuss respectful interactions.
Missy, in this section, we're going to talk about interacting with the handler of the service animal, specifically what you can ask, the responsibilities of the handler, and some helpful tips to foster a positive interaction. Let's start with what you can ask. You may experience a situation when a patron is visiting your organization with an animal, and it's not apparent to you whether the animal is a service animal. According to the ADA, there are 2 questions you may ask. First question is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? The other question is, what work or task has the dog been trained to perform? Now, each organization is unique. While these are the 2 questions the ADA permits to be asked, you may wish to advise staff whether you prefer these questions be asked, or if you would rather staff notify a designated person, such as a supervisor. It is helpful to train staff who interact with visitors and guests about service animals. This can include addressing policies and procedures related to service animals, providing information on service animal relief areas, and describing ways to have positive interactions with individuals and their service animals. This training can help staff to feel confident in knowing their role when it comes to service animals and be more comfortable interacting with visitors and guests with service animals. Missy, let's revisit one of our frequently asked questions from earlier.
Tanya, the question asked, who is responsible for the care and supervision of the service animal? And our answer was, the handler is responsible for caring for and controlling the animal. This question applies to both the workplace and community spaces, but may come up more often for employers when they are engaging in interactive process to provide an effective, reasonable accommodation. It can be helpful for covered entities, including employers, to know the handler is responsible for caring for and supervising the service animal. This includes toileting, feeding, grooming, and veterinarian care. It is not the responsibility of the covered entity to supervise or otherwise care for the service animal. There are ways to accommodate the employee to be able to care for the service animal, and we'll discuss those later in the webinar. Now we're going to discuss interacting with the handler, which is the individual who is using the service animal. It is important to respect the handler and their commands to the animal. The animal is performing a job or task for the individual and relies on the handler for guidance. The animal and the handler should not be separated. For example, this could happen at the security checkpoint. It is best for the animal and the handler to proceed through the checkpoint together if possible. If this is not possible, then the handler would go first and then guide the dog through the checkpoint with a leash or commands. Tanya, it seems like a great time to cover tips about interacting with a service animal.
Yes, let's consider some do's and don'ts when interacting with visitors and guests and coworkers using service animals. This can help create inclusive environments. We'll start with the don'ts section. Don't give the service animal treats. This can be distracting to the animal. Also, the animal may have dietary restrictions. Don't pet the animal. This could also be distracting to the animal and interfere with its focus on the work it is trained to do. This can be hard for dog lovers, but instead, focus on the handler, who is your customer or visitor, and remember the animal is there to perform a task or a job for the individual. Don't distract the animal. This includes making noises, waving, or any other attempt to get the animal to pay attention to you. This is confusing for the animal. Remember, the service animal's work is important, and they're there to assist the individual they are with. And don't give the animal directions or commands. This could be confusing to the animal and cause the animal to not respond to a situation as it should. The handler should be the only person giving the animal direction and commands. Remember, they're a working team. Now, let's talk about things to do related to service animals. Do apply your same standards for customer service when interacting with all guests and visitors, including those with disabilities. These include such things as being courteous, respectful, and not making assumptions when interacting with all guests and visitors to your venue, including those with disabilities. When you're interacting with a coworker or guest individual using a service animal, approach the handler, not the animal, and give the animal space to interact with its handler. Respect the handler and their commands to the animal. Know that sleeping dogs are still working. If the dog's handler is sitting for a prolonged period, the dog may doze off. The dog will come to attention as soon as it is needed. There is not a need to notify the dog's handler that it's taking a nap. Be aware, an unattended service animal is a sign that the handler needs help. The animal is likely to lead you to its handler so you can provide help. Address unruly or destructive behavior with the handler. This list of do's and don'ts can be helpful reminders of respectful ways to interact with visitors and guests coming to your venue when interacting with colleagues in the work environment who use service animals. We have helpful resources on the Accessible Ohio webpage about service animals, which includes a quick guide that refers to the do's and don'ts we just discussed. We will put that link in the chat. With that, let's take a break and answer some questions. Please use the Q&A button at the top of your screen to ask the presenters a question. Julie Wood, the Accessible Ohio manager, will be joining us for the question and answer portion of this webinar.
Thank you, Tanya and Missy. Hi, everyone. I am Julie. I don't at this time see any questions yet in the Q&A, so I'm going to address some pre-submitted questions that we received when folks were registering for today's webinar. We had several similar questions about the process for obtaining a service animal and where to look and how long the waiting list is. So we'll start with that question. This process for obtaining a service animal will be unique for each individual. As we mentioned in the training today, that individuals can train their own animal to be a service animal, or individuals may look for an organization who can do this training instead. And so it may take time to research different organizations who provide service animals The training for the tasks that the service animal will be able to perform will impact the length of training for the animal and for the handler. So finding the animal and the organization who does the training or providing it yourself is all going to be unique and can impact things like how much it costs for obtaining a service animal, how long it may take to train it, and what the wait list might be. Another pre-submitted question that we received was related to service dogs in training and when they are required to be given the same rights as a trained service dog. And the Department of Justice speaks to this through the guidance under the Americans with Disabilities Act, which states that a service dog must be trained before going into public spaces. And I am going to check to see what questions. I think we have a few that are coming in now. First question is there any other animal than a dog or miniature pony that could be considered a service animal? So the answer to that from the ADA under Titles 2 and 3 is that a service animal is a dog or a miniature horse. Another question we're receiving is if professional training is not required and identifying a vest is not required, what is the best way to ensure an animal is properly trained? So I don't know if this question might be coming from the employment side when a person is requesting to utilize their service animal in the workplace. You can consider during the interactive process a trial period to have the employee bring the service animal into work and see how this goes for the effectiveness of still performing the essential functions of the job, and any other accommodations that you may have implemented for modifying breaks so that the employee can manage the needs of the service animal throughout the day, and to identify that the employee has the animal under control, and those types of things. In the community spaces, there are the two questions that were addressed in the webinar that you can ask a person who has an animal with them in a community space. So that's how I would recommend navigating, knowing that a service animal is trained properly. Another question coming in, how would one best make accommodations with an employer for the use of a service animal? That's a great question. Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act does not specifically speak to animals in the workplace or service animals in the workplace. And so if an employee requests to use their service animal in the workplace, you would treat that as you would any request for an accommodation and begin the interactive process where you engage in that collaboration with the employee to communicate about the need for the accommodation and to determine the effectiveness of the options of accommodations. In employment, it might be a matter of modifying a no animal policy to permit the service animal to be present. It might mean that you are looking at a flexible schedule, which I just mentioned, so the person can take breaks as needed to manage the needs of the animal. It might be relocating the employee's workstation so they're near an exit so they can easily and quickly enter and exit the building to manage the service animal's needs. A few more questions we'll take here, and then we'll go back to the content and we will continue with questions towards the end. What steps should one take if a service animal is denied entry into a store or a facility? I would just say consult with the guidance under the Americans with Disabilities Act as far as what steps to take there, and whether or not there is financial assistance for getting a service animal. This person's comment is that they have heard these are very expensive. And that's going to be a case-by-case exploration as well. And I would say that when you are looking at the organizations online who provide service animals, they do often address funding. And so if there are ways to supplement the purchase or the training cost of the service animal, those types of resources might be located with those organizations as well. All right, so I will be back at the next Q&A break, the next questions and answers towards the end of the webinar, and I will turn it back to you, Tanya, to continue with the content. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Yes, we will talk on ways now to accommodate service animals in the workplace and in the community. First, we'll highlight aspects of navigating a request for a person with a disability who will use a service animal in the workplace as a reasonable accommodation. Then we'll discuss how to use reasonable accommodation statements and accessibility web pages to inform employees, visitors, and guests of how to communicate a request for an accommodation or modification, and who to ask when they have questions. Finally, we'll share some best practices for service animal relief areas, which can be included in the workplace and community spaces. Missy, let's start with discussing workplace accommodations and service animals.
Sounds good. In this section, we will provide a brief overview of reasonable accommodations, discuss navigating the interactive process, address how staff trainings can be helpful, and share tips for managing concerns like allergies and fears. Tanya, I think it might be helpful to begin with discussing what a reasonable accommodation is.
I agree. A reasonable accommodation is a change in the workplace that enables an individual with a disability to access the hiring process and the work environment, perform the job's essential functions, and enjoy the benefits of employment. Reasonable accommodations are organized into the following types: making the work environment accessible, restructuring a job, permitting a flexible schedule, alternating or providing equipment or services, modifying policies, and providing reassignment. Reasonable accommodations are identified and implemented through the interactive process. The interactive process is the collaboration between the employee requesting the accommodation and the employer. It often begins with a request from an individual for an accommodation, and in this case, a request to use their service animal at work. The next step is to determine whether to ask for documentation for the accommodation. The employer is not required to obtain documentation, but is permitted to under these circumstances. When an individual's disability is not apparent and or the need for the requested reasonable accommodation is not apparent. Once an accommodation is requested and the documentation is obtained if it is needed, the employee and the employer collaborate together to identify an effective solution.
Tanya, to help illustrate some of these steps of the interactive process, I would like to introduce Mario and his service animal, Pluto. Mario is hard of hearing and works as an architect. He uses a service animal to notify him of various sounds in the workplace. Pluto performs these tasks by nudging Mario to get his attention. At work, Mario uses a desk in a cubicle environment, which can be noisy, and performs tasks on his computer for most of the workday. His work requires concentration and focus. He does not hear when his phone rings or someone enters his work area. His phone has a light as a visual indicator when it rings, but Mario often misses this due to his focus on his work. Mario requested to use Pluto, his service animal, at work, and through the interactive process, his employer approved this accommodation. Pluto is trained to alert Mario to a call and when someone enters his workspace. Now we'd like to discuss specifically how accommodating a service animal in the workplace can be determined during the interactive process by sharing some examples.
Missy, identifying a reasonable accommodation is always a case-by-case determination, as each employee, employer, and workplace is unique. Accommodating a service animal may include implementing a few types of accommodations, such as modifying a no animal policy to permit a service animal in the workplace, permitting a flexible schedule to manage the animal's needs throughout the work shift, and making the work environment accessible. This can be done by locating the employee's workspace close to an exit, providing an easier way for the employee to take the animal outside. A common question employers have is about what to do when they determine there are areas of the workplace where service animals are not permitted. In this case, the employer and the employee should collaborate to determine an effective solution. For example, If the employee and the service animal can be apart for a period of time, the solution may be to provide a safe place for the animal to be while the employee performs the work task. If the employee and the service animal need to remain together, the solution may be to determine if there's another way to perform the work task effectively. As we discussed, this will always be a case-by-case determination. Once a solution has been determined, it is time to implement. There are some things to consider when an employee is using their service animal in the workplace. It is important to talk with the employee about their responsibilities for caring for the service animal's needs, ensuring the animal is not disruptive, and keeping the animal clean. Employers can expect the animal to be under the care and control of the employee and that it is trained to act appropriately. To support the success of this accommodation, collaborate with the employee to establish the service animal's relief area, designate a break schedule to tend to the animal's need, and practice emergency procedures for shelter in place and evacuation situations with the animal. Employers may consider implementing accommodations on a trial period. This can help to assess the effectiveness of the accommodation and demonstrate how the employee will effectively care for and control the service animal during their workday. Now, consider how you will inform all employees an animal will be in the workplace and educate them on proper etiquette for interactions. Missy, will you share some options employers can consider?
Sure, Tanya. It's important to inform all employees when an animal will be in the workplace so they know how to interact properly and who to contact if they have questions. It's also important to consider the confidentiality guidelines that prohibit disclosing an individual's disability. Begin with asking the employee how they would like to approach educating their coworkers about the presence of the service animal in the workplace. They may prefer to educate coworkers themselves, but are not required to. Another approach is to simply inform employees a service animal will be present in the workplace and they are not to interact with it. Collaborate with the employee using the service animal to create the announcement before notifying all employees. Avoid sharing the employee's name, disability, or the term reasonable accommodation. Instead, make a general announcement that a service animal will be present at work and indicate guidelines will be provided for proper interactions. This announcement could lead to coworkers asking the employee about their disability or the service animal. Inform the employee they do not have to disclose their disability to coworkers or answer questions about their service animal. It may be helpful for the employee to prepare a response in case they are asked questions so they are not caught off guard. In addition, the employee may prefer the employer provide disability etiquette training, which addresses the do's and don'ts we shared earlier in the webinar. Some employers provide this kind of training proactively to all employees on a regular basis, and others plan for this when they know a service animal will be present in the workplace. OOD offers a variety of disability etiquette trainings, and we are happy to talk with employers about their training needs to help them identify what he and his employer worked together to have a general announcement sent to all staff that a service animal would be present in the workplace. This announcement provided them with the date of an upcoming disability etiquette training on how to interact properly and included contact information in case employees had questions in the meantime. While planning for ways to inform employees about the presence of an animal, be prepared that coworkers may have concerns about allergies or fears they have. Tanya, before we address these concerns, we have another poll question for the audience. The poll will appear on your screen. Can employees request accommodations for an allergy to or a fear of service animals? Please select yes or no.
We're waiting for all of our responses to come in. And it looks like the majority of our audience thinks that, yes, you can request an accommodation for an allergy. Missy, what's the answer?
And that is correct. Employees can request an accommodation related to allergies and fears. The employer would treat these requests as they would any other request for a reasonable accommodation and begin the interactive process promptly. Remember our scenario about Mario? When the employer sent the announcement to all employees about the presence of a service animal at work, some employees expressed concerns about allergies to pet dander. Tanya, what can employers do when employees have allergies or fears related to animals?
Well, there are a variety of ideas to consider when you're collaborating with the employee during the interactive process. I'll share a few. Provide one of the employees an enclosed workspace, like a private office, or permit the employee using the service animal and the employee with the allergy to animals to work in different areas. Plan to have the employees use common areas at different times, and establish separate paths of travel for each employee. Specific to accommodating allergies, you could consider the use of a portable air purifier at each workstation and include HEPA filters in the ventilation system. Here's what Mario's employer did. They accommodated both Mario and the individuals with allergies by providing an air purifier for Mario's office, increasing the cleaning schedule for places the animal visits, and designating which break areas and common areas are animal-free and which are animal-friendly. Next, we're going to discuss the importance of reasonable accommodation statements and accessibility web pages. Let's start with the workplace. A reasonable accommodation statement communicates the right to reasonable accommodation and invites an individual with a disability to request an accommodation when needed, and provides contact information that informs the individual how to make the request. It's important to post this statement in key locations, such as in job descriptions and postings, on application forms, in accommodation policies, and in invitations to interviews, meetings, and events.
Using a reasonable accommodation statement can send the message to candidates and employees that an employer cares about what individuals with disabilities need in the workplace. Tanya, how would a similar message on an accessibility webpage send the same message to visitors and guests?
An accessibility webpage is a place on the website for organizations to communicate their accessibility features in one location for individuals to review. This includes features of the digital and built environment. One example is a service animal relief area, which is a great way to accommodate visitors and guests who use service animals. We'll talk about that more in just a moment. An accessibility page customarily includes a statement about the organization's commitment to accessibility, the accessibility standards and laws the organization follows, and contact information for visitors and guests to use if they encounter a barrier, have a question, or need to request a specific accommodation. This helps visitors and guests plan their visit by gaining awareness of what the organization offers, and provides contact information if they wish to request an accommodation or modification to access the venue and experience the service available.
Tanya, including an accessibility webpage is one way to demonstrate a commitment to inclusion. Businesses that value accessibility may broaden their market and be viewed more favorably by people with and without disabilities. Earlier, we talked about accommodating service animals in the workplace. One way to accommodate service animals in the community space is to create a service animal relief area, commonly called a SARA. Tanya, would you please share some best practices?
I'd be happy to. A service animal relief area is a designated area for an individual to manage the needs of their service animal. These could be considered in both the workplace and community spaces. It is best practice to locate the SARA in a convenient area and on an accessible route. Include a hard surface for the individual to navigate and a soft surface for the service animal to utilize. Include adequate space for an individual using a mobility device, like a wheelchair or a scooter to assist their service animal on a 6-foot leash. It can be helpful to provide disposable bags, a waste receptacle, and hand sanitizer. Remember to maintain the area and plan for regular cleaning, and check to make sure the accessible route remains barrier-free. Items like bags and sanitizers are stocked and waste receptacles are emptied. Ensure cleaning products used are safe for animals and avoid using cleaning products which create strong chemical smells. Lastly, be sure to inform staff who interact with your visitors and guests about the SARA so they can help direct them to where it's located and answer questions.
Tanya, to help illustrate accommodating service animals in the community, I would like to share a story about Amy and her service animal, Bailey. Amy has a physical disability and enjoys swimming after work at the fitness center. She uses a service animal to assist with opening doors and retrieving items, like her towel when she gets out of the pool. When she joined the fitness center, she asked about her service animal coming with her when she visits. The fitness center had questions about having a service animal there, like where would Amy take the dog to manage its needs? After collaborating with Amy, the fitness center followed best practices to establish a service animal relief area outside near the main entrance to the building on an accessible route. Amy regularly visits the fitness center to swim after work with access to all she and Bailey need as she participates in her favorite sport. As we are nearing the end of this webinar, it's a good time to stop and answer some more questions. If you would like to ask the presenters a question, please use the Q&A button at the top of your screen. Julie Wood is going to join us again for this portion to answer more pre-submitted questions we have received. Welcome back, Julie.
Thank you, Missy, and hi again, everyone. I am going to start with the last of our pre-submitted questions and then move to the questions that we have in the Q&A section of the webinar. The question that was pre-submitted asked if someone is suspected to falsely claim to have a service animal, how can that be remedied? So in this situation, we go back to what the ADA says that we can ask individuals with animals in community spaces. And so those two questions are, if there's uncertainty about whether a dog is a service animal, these two questions are, is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? The second question is, what work or task has the dog been trained to perform? And then also, according to the guidance from the Americans with Disabilities Act, if the animal is being disruptive and there is no effective action that's being taken by the handler to control it, an organization may ask that the animal be removed. The organization may also ask the animal be removed if it is not housebroken. Okay, so let's see what we have here in the Q&A section. The first question is asking, how can an employer address a situation where an employee requests an accommodation to utilize a service animal in the workplace where other employees are allergic to animals? So I know that we spoke to this in today's webinar. I know a best practice when an animal is going to be in the workplace is to inform from a general perspective all employees so that they're aware, and then share the proper etiquette with them that we talked about today. If you get concerns from coworkers about allergies or fears, you would engage in the interactive process as you do with any request for an accommodation that you receive, and then collaborate with that employee about their unique situation and discuss the effective solutions for accommodations. We shared some today. So this could be increase cleaning, provide air purifiers, provide separate offices, consider separate paths of travel or designated spaces where the service animal can be, such as a break room, or not be if you have more than one break room. So that's how you would navigate that. Tanya, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's good, Julie.
Okay. Another question. We've received some questions about emotional support animals, and just as a reminder, today is focused on service animals. The ADA guidance does speak to this in the sense that because these animals are not trained to perform a task, they are not considered service animals. And so we know that Title II and Title III speak directly to service animals, which is the focus of today's webinar. We have a question asking what tasks can a miniature horse help with? We know that the guidance from the ADA does talk about service animals and specifically dogs, but they do have a provision for miniature horses. Today, as we mentioned, was focused on dogs as service animals. So it's going to be unique for each animal and each individual what they're trained to perform. Tanya, did you run across anything specifically? I know we were focused on dogs, but by chance, did you find anything about miniature horses?
Miniature horses can do a variety of things. Sometimes they're used to stabilize an individual who may be trying to stand. They may be used, again, like dogs, to open or close doors. They may be used to help pull a mobility device. So those are just some examples.
Thank you. Another question we have is, can an employer deny a service animal? So again, when an employee is requesting to use their service animal at work, an employer would engage in the interactive process and consider that request as you would any request that you receive for an accommodation. During that conversation, you're going to discuss how this accommodation enables the individual to effectively access the work environment, perform the essential functions of the job, and or enjoy the benefits of employment. In that discussion, if there are concerns with the service animal, such as environments that maybe the animal's not permitted to be in, those things would be worked out uniquely in that interactive process. If an employer were to identify that there was a part of the work environment the service animal was not permitted to be in, the best thing to do then is to consider options such as, can that work task in that environment be performed in another way where these individual can utilize their service animal? Or is it possible that the individual and the service animal are able to be apart for a period of time, and there's a place that we can effectively accommodate having the service animal while the employee is performing the task in this area, and then the two are back together at other times during the workday? That may not be the effective solution, but these might be things that the employer considers as they work through their unique interactive process with this request. I'm going to scroll to see what else we have in here. There's a question asking, I have a question about answering, what task is the dog trained to do? Wouldn't that reveal the nature of the disability, which the individual may not wish to disclose? That's a great question, and I think we'd want to consult the guidance from the Americans with Disabilities Act in more detail to work through that, because we are given in the guidance the two questions that are permitted to be asked. Another question asking, is there something in writing that states what one can do if you don't think it's a service animal, if it is being disruptive? I would just like to be able to print and show that ruling if needed. So we have in our resource guide that accompanies the webinar, the resources from the Americans with Disabilities Act that we use to provide today's content. And in those resources, it addresses, again, those two questions that you are permitted to ask. It does address that the service animal is to be under the control of the handler, and indicates if the animal is being disruptive that it can be asked to be removed. And so that is guidance that's available to all of us to reference and might be helpful in the situation that's being asked about. Just going to scan quickly to see what else we have. There's a question asking if a building owner can deny a service animal, and I would say whether it's for employment or for community spaces, always reference the guidance from the Americans with Disabilities Act, because anywhere that a community member is permitted to go, according to the general guidance from the Americans with Disabilities Act, the service animal is able to accompany them. If there are unique environments where the service animal isn't permitted to go, it gives some examples. And so it's probably best to start there to tease out these unique situations for the various organizations or locations that have these concerns. And some of the questions coming in about rights and responsibilities, I would point to the Americans with Disabilities Act guidance that we shared in the resource guide to find out maybe where to go with additional questions related to those. And I believe we have touched on all that have come in, so I'm going to turn it back to you, Tanya and Missy, to conclude today's webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Those were some great questions. Before we close, we'd like to share the ways we can be a resource to you as you take this information into your unique environments. Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities offers a variety of services at no cost to you that you may find helpful. Through Accessible Ohio, we can provide direct consultations with organizations to help identify their goals and assist them with making their environments more accessible and inclusive. We provide education on how to have respectful interactions with everyone, including individuals with disabilities, coworkers, visitors, and guests. This training can be designed to include additional content related to interacting with individuals who use service animals, and it can be customized to highlight the features your venue has to accommodate an individual with a service animal. Lastly, we have a service animal resource on our webpage that includes a quick guide with helpful reminders of how to have respectful interactions and a resource on service animal relief areas, which share best practices for implementing one in your environment. Please contact us, and the Accessible Ohio specialist in your region will be happy to talk with you about your goals and customize our services to help you achieve them. Tanya, would you like to close us out today?
Sure, thanks, Missy. Today we discussed what a service animal is and how to have respectful interactions with individuals who use service animals. We discussed ways to accommodate a service animal in the workplace, how to communicate your commitment to accessibility and inclusion through the use of a reasonable accommodation statement in the workplace, and an accessibility webpage for your visitors and guests, and ways to successfully utilize a service animal relief area in the workplace and community spaces. Finally, we shared how OOD can be a resource for training your staff about service animals and how to have respectful interactions with coworkers and visitors and guests who use service animals. We hope today's information helps you to make your workplaces and community spaces more accessible and inclusive for everyone. We have many services to support you, including training and direct consultations. Please contact us. We are happy to continue the conversation.